Hello, and welcome to Between Two Beards. I am Andrew,
And I'm Dave.
and today we are going to be reviewing and talking about Sentinels of the Multiverse.
The card game.
Yes, because the Multiverse is a card game. So, would you like to take this from here, Dave?
I would love to. This game is awesome. I have to say this is another Kickstarter game. I got introduced to the game last year. It is a comic book themed card game. It's kind of a deck building game, and although you actually get all the decks that you need, the game is laid out as so. You get heroes.
Side note, this is with all of the current expansions and editions.
Yes. So your box, when you get it, will not be this full. It'll actually be about 2/3 this. I have right here is all the scenarios, the places where you actually fight the villains. These are all the villains, and then heroes that you can play. There's all sorts of characters, character types you'll be familiar with, character classes you'll be familiar with, and each deck is laid out and set up differently, so each character you play has its own complete unique play style. Some characters, each card that you play is actually the actual attack for the against the villain. Other cards or other characters actually have their own attack as they are, and the card that you play is a modifier for that attack. The actual scenarios, the places that you actually fight the villain at, they add a completely new dynamic to the game than you would expect. Some places have got characters that fight alongside you. Other places have got characters that fight against you or augment the villain. It really just depends on where you're fighting each villain. You've got villains that are your arch nemesis to some of the heroes, so on and so forth. Different timelines and different characters. It's a really fun game.
Yeah. Like he was saying, everything in the game is based from certain comic book archetypes you've known and loved, or they've even in some of the later down the road expansions that we'll talk about later in another video. They've started pulling from archetypes from other things. Like there is a character that is a direct, I don't want to say rip-off, but he is the gunslinger from the Gunslinger books by Stephen King. I mean, he's probably the and there's one that's the dude from The Big Lebowski.
The dude.
So I mean, there are some that start pulling from popular culture and not so much comic books. But the stuff you get in the base box is all very comic book related. It might not be the straight archetype. Like there's a character named Tempest, and he is kind of a mix between Storm and
Aquaman.
Yeah, Aquaman. But like Tachyon, she is the Flash, but a chick. There's Wraith, and that's just Batman, but again, it's a chick. They kind of do kind of a weird role reverse or gender reversal on a lot of the characters, which is fine. Greater Than Games is very like pro strong female characters and such. So a lot of the characters are females, but they don't come off as being like the sassy kind of weird sidekick that's just there for breasts. Like the characters could stand up on their own if they were actually their own comic book characters.
They're actually interesting characters as portrayed in the card, and the cards themselves, whether it be this gender or that, male or female, or character class of this, each individual one is actually an interesting and unique character. They augment and offset each other, and some actually play well together, or some don't play as well together. Some play better together if you're fighting a particular villain, or not. It really just depends on each character. Better Than Games thought this game out very well, and the artwork is very good, and as you buy more of the expansions, you'll see where the artwork actually has continued to get even more clear.
And I know the Sit Down and Shut Up guys, they didn't like the game. They liked the game, but they said the artwork style was too all over the place, and it was because they were nitpicking something that's basically because the artwork is supposed to be from like a comic book. You get kind of that comic book vibe. So there's some cards where they're not doing anything; they're kind of standing around looking. But then there's others where it's the action card, and so because it's an action card, it's that comic book action where you don't really know what's going on. Some of the cards it makes sense what's going on, others you don't make a lot of sense. And one of their complaints was actually a Tempest card where it's two tornadoes slamming into each other, and they said the art style was really crappy, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because it's two tornadoes slamming into each other. There isn't a whole lot of detail in a tornado.
Not much required either.
Yeah. So I mean, as we know, being from Kansas City, so did the obligatory tornado joke from a person from Kansas. That's
Yes.
required. So, no, I had him out for a reason too.
Okay.
To show the cover, the cards. It's kind of set up like a comic book cover. You have your power down here. You can use 1 power per turn. You have your health pool up here. I'm sorry, I'm doing this backwards. You have your name, and you also down here you have your that symbol is your nemesis. And as Dave mentioned, the nemesis system is actually kind of interesting because just like in comic books, each person, and some of them don't even have their nemesis yet. Either it's a villain who doesn't have their hero nemesis, or it's a hero who doesn't have their villain nemesis. And the nemesis system just makes it so that they do more damage against each other because they don't like each other so much, which makes sense. So,
yeah, all in all, I'd say it's a great game. It's an excellent purchase. The game itself is not too terribly expensive. I believe the price point was at less than $50 to start out.
I think the base extended box, which is the big giant box you get with all the dividers and such, I think is $40. It might be $40.
Yeah.
And I think each of the expansion boxes is $20.
Yeah, they're priced very, very competitively. The case itself is excellent sized. The game itself is still supported by this game. Again, it's called Better Than Games.
Greater Than Games.
Greater Than Games.
And I also want to note, I actually talked to Chris Bedell. He's the artist, I think, or character designer for Greater Than Games at Gen Con. He was a really cool guy. I talked to him about Story Wars, which is another game we had reviewed prior to this video. And they're all around really nice guys. They're really cool. If you can ever get the chance to talk to them, do it. I mean, they're always happy to talk to their fans, it seems like, and talk about their game or the design. And also, they don't mind if you come up and say, we absolutely despise character whatever. Because I told him straight to his face, I said, I hate Absolute Zero. And he's like, that's fine. Absolute Zero is not made for everybody. And I said, I get that, but I hate Absolute Zero. And I'm just letting you know. So.
Well, like I said, it's a great game. Certainly, I'd say check it out. It's still under support for the game. There's actually several expansions to the game, like Andrew was saying before. We'll go ahead and go over these in a later video another time. There's also a new reverse expansion of the game where basically you're playing as the villains against the heroes. There'll be more to follow on that as well when that actually comes out. It's still out on Kickstarter, so it's not actually been released yet.
Yeah, it was Kickstarted as part of one of their expansions, but it's been pushed back to February of 2014, unfortunately. So they were hoping to have it out before Gen Con. That wasn't the case. They didn't want to put out a subpar product. And they're one of the few companies who seems like they're willing to come out and tell their customer base, hey, we were trying to rush something and it was going to not be good. So we're not going to just give you something because you'll buy it. We're going to make sure it's a good game. So
I think it's an excellent company as well. I was checking their website. If you're missing a card, you can order up the card. They're actually inexpensive to replace a card. If you're missing a deck for a character or any of the missing pieces or parts for the card, any of the expansion parts, you can just order them individually or decks as a whole, so you can expand. There are some limited edition characters that I've heard talk may or may not be released and made available in the future. You know, if you were part of that Kickstarter and the future Kickstarter projects that they do have special things they support with the game mat, all sorts of stuff. Really interesting company, really interesting game. They've got some other games coming out. So Greater Than Games, check them out.
well, what are you gonna rate the core game?
Personally, I'd rate the core game. I'd give it a 5 out of 5. I love this game.
Yeah, I'd say it's a 5 out of 5.
Really fun game. I normally keep it in my car just in case I'm going to my local game store, hanging out with some buddies. It's a great scenario game. You can get through a whole game in as little as 20 minutes if you've got a large number of people. It is limited to a 5-player game max.
But I will say on that point, you can expand the game easily. The villains become very, very brutal, though, if you go past 5 players. Because a lot of their damage and elements are based around the number of players and then a modifier to that. So a lot of the villains will go from doing damage to something where they will just start mashing people's faces in. And you've got to be very careful. So yes, 5 players is the recommended max. You can go higher, but if you do, don't cry when the boss one-shots one of your party members.
Don't expect to win the game every time. And each character or each villain comes in 2 different ways that you play the villain. You start out the game with one side of the villain and you flip it over mid-game, and it affects the gameplay. I'd say check it out. Really check out this game. Again, it's at Greater Than Games.
Yep. And pay attention for our second review, the part sorry, air quotes, part 2. I'm a big fan of air quotes. Part 2 should be coming soon, so just keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for watching this video, and please subscribe.
See ya.
Bye.